A single line on a centuries-old map convinced empires there was a hidden continent. So vast, so rich, and so certain that it changed the course of world history. This is not legend, but a factual error. Terra Australis, etched into atlases by Oronce Fine in 1531 and believed by explorers, kings, and scientists for generations. Based on nothing more than ancient ideas of symmetry, this invisible land drove nations to race, gamble, and even clash for ghostly riches. In How a Mistake on a Map Changed the World, you'll see how one myth redrew borders, fueled ambitions, and set destinies. But how could a single, imaginary continent bend the will of empires for centuries? Pythagoras looked at the world and saw order where others saw chaos. For him, the universe demanded balance. Land in the north must be matched by land in the south. This wasn't just philosophy, it was mathematics turned into a worldview. By the time Claudius Ptolemy drew his famous map in the 2nd century, the idea had become geometry on parchment. He set a grid over the known world, dividing it into lines and arcs, and left a vast blank space below Africa and Asia, labeled as Terra Incognita. That empty space wasn't just a gap, it was a promise, a mathematical certainty waiting to be filled. Medieval scholars copied Ptolemy's work for centuries, treating his coordinates as gospel. Monks in scriptoria traced coastlines they'd never seen, trusting that the world's balance required a southern landmass to counter the weight of Europe, Asia, and Africa. The symmetry doctrine spread through generations of mapmakers, reinforced by the authority of classical texts. No explorer had glimpsed these southern shores, but the logic felt unbreakable. What existed above the equator must be mirrored below. To question it was to question the harmony of the universe. By the 15th century, this belief had become more than a theory. It was a guiding principle for how the world was imagined and drawn. The blank southern expanse was no longer a mystery, it was a necessity, as real on paper as any mountain or river. When Renaissance scholars rediscovered Ptolemy's geography, they inherited not just his coordinates, but his conviction that the Earth's design demanded perfect balance. The stage was set for the next leap, from inherited myth to an error that would soon have a name, a face, and a place on every map. Oronce Fine sat at his desk in Paris in 1531, pen in hand, ready to redraw the world. His new map didn't just show what was known, it made the unknown look inevitable. Fine's projection was a heart, split in two, each half cradling familiar continents, and below them, a sweeping southern land. He labeled it Terra Australis Inventa sed nondum plene cognita, the southern land recently discovered but not yet fully known. Rivers, mountains, even capes and bays traced its edge, as if explorers had already set foot there. But this was geometry turned into geography. The heart shape, or cordiform projection, was more than a flourish. It was mathematics made visible, a bold assertion that the world's balance demanded a southern twin for the lands above the equator. Fine's map didn't stay locked away in Paris. Printers copied it, scholars pored over it. Within a year, it appeared in the influential Novus Orbis Regionum and began its journey across Europe. Each new edition, each fresh impression, carried the southern continent with it. The map's authority grew with every replication. By the 1550s, Gerardus Mercator, the most respected name in mapping, adopted the cordiform projection for his own world map. Abraham Ortelius, creator of the first modern atlas, followed suit, his 1570 edition featuring a southern land labeled Terra Australis Nondum Cognita. What began as mathematical symmetry became, in the hands of these masters, a visual certainty. The ink on Fine's map gave the southern continent a reality words alone never could. No explorer had charted those coasts, but the world now saw them, rendered in careful lines and Latin script. The heart-shaped world offered more than a new way to see the globe. It offered proof, or at least the illusion of it. As these maps spread to the desks of kings, merchants, and navigators, The idea hardened into fact. Empires would soon act on what the mapmakers had imagined. French ships set their sights on the southern oceans, loaded with scientists and royal ambitions. In Paris, the Academy of Sciences debated the shape of the world, dispatching expeditions like Bougainville's and later La Perouse's to chart what Dutch maps left blank. The Dutch, for their part, had already swept the coasts of New Holland. Their charts, stamped with the orange lion, traced jagged shorelines from the Cape to the Timor Sea, but the interior remained a mystery, disappointingly dry, with no sign of the gold or spices that fueled European dreams. The French saw opportunity in those gaps. Each new voyage carried the hope of claiming a continent before a rival could plant a flag. Admiralty officials in London watched nervously as French atlases grew thicker, their southern margins filled with speculation and promise. Every new map from Amsterdam or Paris arrived in Whitehall like a challenge. The race was no longer just about what existed, but about who could prove it first. The stakes were clear. Whoever mapped the unknown would control it. In the shadow of these rivalries, the British Admiralty began to plan in secret, determined not to be outpaced by continental competitors. Alexander Dalrymple was not content to let the southern continent remain a matter of myth and speculation. In 1767, he published a pamphlet that electrified the Royal Society and the Admiralty, arguing that Terra Australis was more than a cartographer's fantasy. It was the missing piece in Britain's imperial future. Dalrymple pored over accounts from Dutch, Spanish, and Portuguese voyages, stitching together rumors and sightings into a bold economic vision. He claimed that this southern land could support 50 million people, a market that would eclipse the Americas and Asia combined. The numbers were staggering, but Dalrymple insisted they were grounded in logic. The world's balance required land in the south to match the north, and where there was land, there would be people and riches. His arguments came at a moment when the British government was searching for new opportunities abroad. Dalrymple's pamphlets circulated through Whitehall, filled with tables, wind patterns, and trade projections. He promised a continent ripe for commerce, a place where British goods would flow and silver would return in kind. The Admiralty, wary of French and Spanish expansion, found his reasoning hard to ignore. Dalrymple's intellectual campaign turned the southern continent from a philosophical question into an urgent policy. Within months, the Admiralty began drawing up secret orders, convinced by his vision that the next great prize lay somewhere beyond the edge of the known world. Cook anchored at Tahiti in April 1769, officially to watch Venus cross the sun. The real assignment waited in a sealed envelope, orders to sweep the southern Pacific for the continent every mapmaker insisted was there. With the transit observed, Cook turned south, charting empty ocean where myth had promised land. He pressed on, tracing the coasts of New Zealand for 6 months, measuring each inlet and headland with a surveyor's precision. The result? 2 islands, no sign of a continent, and no connection to any southern landmass. Cook's charts closed one of the biggest gaps in the world's geography, but the Admiralty wanted certainty. His navigation left no room for error. Over 2,400 miles of coastline mapped, every bay and cape recorded. The evidence was clear, yet the hope for Terra Australis lingered. London responded with a second set of secret instructions. This time, Cook would push even further south. Cook steered HMS Resolution into the unknown on January 17, 1773, crossing the Antarctic Circle at 66 degrees 33 minutes south, a feat no European had achieved. For weeks, his crew battled freezing gales and towering walls of ice, pushing farther south than any ship before them. On February 3, 1774, Cook reached 71 degrees 10 minutes south, only to find an endless barrier of ice stretching from horizon to horizon. There was no temperate continent, no green shores, only the frozen limits of the world itself. The myth that had shaped 3 centuries of maps died on the edge of that ice. Cook's logbook closed the case. If land existed this far south, it would be locked in perpetual winter, unreachable and uninhabitable. The The southern continent, once a certainty, vanished from the map in a single generation. In 1531, Oronce Fine's cordiform map, labeled Terra Australis, as recently discovered but not yet fully known. That single caption, based on ancient theories of balance and symmetry, became accepted fact for centuries. Empires invested fortunes, and Alexander Dalrymple predicted 50 million people lived on a continent that did not exist. Cook's voyages, guided by secret admiralty orders and the latest technology, finally disproved the myth by 1775, yet for generations, maps and textbooks still showed the phantom land. Some archival records about strategic decisions remain restricted, leaving parts of the imperial calculus unclear. Today, every border and coastline on a map is the product of choices, errors, and power struggles, not just geography. The story of Terra Australis proves that a single mistake, repeated and trusted, can reshape nations. The lines we see today are not permanent truths, but reminders of how easily the world can be redrawn.